Hi and welcome to the Geek Legion of Doom. This is an episode review of Spartacus Season 3, Episode 6, The Spoils of War. So this episode starts off straight in the action. Now, if you remember from the end of last episode, we had the Romans essentially breaking into the city through the front doors, led by Caesar. And the first sort of like quarter of this episode is really just action-packed, and it's just the Romans literally just sweeping through this city and driving the sort of Spartacus' men and the rebels basically back through the sort of like the rear gate, if you like, of the city. Now, this will have a couple of spoilers in it. If you remember my last review of the last episode, I said that I'd heard that there was a character that was going to die, and I'd heard that Gannicus was going to bite it this episode. And I'm pleased to say he didn't, because he's actually probably my favourite character of the show. And I do love him and Saxa as a couple as well. I think they're a great couple. I'd like to see a Saxa and Gannicus spin-off. That's what I'd like to see. But anyway, I digress. I'd have to say this probably episode is maybe the most Gannicus focused episode of this particular season. So you don't actually see a hell of a lot of Spartacus, to be honest with you. There's one quite good scene just towards the end of the sort of like the sort of first act where the rebels are getting sort of beaten back through the gates, and you sort of see Caesar and Crassus really sort of lock eyes for the first time. And I thought that was a really great scene, and it came off really well. The fight scenes are pretty good. Not the best fight scenes, maybe. I mean, kind of it was all very, lots of people, lots all over the place. So maybe I preferred maybe the fight scenes where you have just one opponent versus one opponent, or maybe two or three people. But for the most part, it was a pretty exciting first part of the episode. And why I say it's more of a Gannicus focused episode is because he basically agrees to try and stay back behind to try and distract the Romans from cutting off the escape. Now, as I say, I'd heard rumours that he was going to be killed this episode. I thought, oh well, that's obviously what's going to happen then, and he's going to go off and get killed. And he stays behind with one other sort of one other Spartacus men. I forget the character's name. He's kind of one of these supporting ones you see sort of semi-regularly, quite a big guy. And they stumble across the sort of the young sort of slave girl as well, who's kind of sort of seemingly infatuated with Gannicus as well. So basically the three of them are sort of really sort of attempt to sort of burn down sort of a portion of the city to try and distract the Romans. It completely fails and doesn't really do anything apart from the fact that it ends up trapping Gannicus and this female slave under a house, sort of trying to hide out. And the other sort of Spartacus' men, I forget the character's name as I say, he kind of gets captured along with a few others. So the majority of the episode really is kind of focused on the Romans occupying the city and kind of what they're doing with it. So a couple of interesting things happen. You've really got Gannicus and this sort of this female slave kind of sort of bonding a little bit about in their sort of attempts to escape and kind of outweight the Romans. And there's some great things there where sort of Gannicus is like, he's pretty much given up, and she sort of pep talks him and kind of like keeps his spirits up. There's some quite disturbing torture scenes in this episode, I have to say. The Romans sort of have captured a number of the Spartacus' men and do some quite brutal torture with them. They kind of literally rip one guy's limbs from limbs and just bash the heads in some other ones. I did quite like Caesar in this episode as well. He came across as a lot better this episode. There's some friction building up with him and Tiberius, and they're kind of seemingly sort of trying to sort of outmaneuver each other and sort of like to sort of gain favour with Crassus. I'm assuming obviously Caesar's going to come out on top on that one. So obviously you got the sort of torture scenes there, and Tiberius has been sort of tasked with essentially organising sort of the celebrations, and he basically ends up trying to sort of pit Caesar in a match with the last remaining captured of Spartacus men, who is this kind of like semi-regular character that we've seen. And it's a decent fight, and of course obviously Caesar wins. Now another interesting development with this one is the female Roman who was kind of the wife of the guy, one of the guys that Spartacus killed in the in the city, who's sort of been a fairly major role in this season so far. She is actually given to the pirates, who the leader of that is actually still alive. He's got a big scar across his face now, but he's still alive, which I found surprising. And he's sort of been given to her she's been given to him, sorry, as a kind of like a reward for basically betraying Spartacus along with some gold. And he's told, you know, that he has to sort of be out of the city at a certain time. And this sort of aids Gannicus in his plans, because he sort of sees them and basically confronts them and actually kills them. And sort of rescues, just on the off chance, he rescues this sort of female Roman who's been branded as slave herself. And the female slave, the young female slave, and Gannicus managed to escape the city, and I was very relieved. There's some great final scenes, because it's quite tense, because obviously, you know, if you know your history, obviously, you know, it doesn't end particularly well for Spartacus and his men, so there's going to be some deaths basically at some point. So it was kind of, you're waiting for the inevitable now, for them to either get killed or captured. So it was quite exciting to sort of, because you don't know whether Gannicus is going to make out or not, and it's quite good that he does. So I was really pleased with that. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the end of this episode, because it turns out that Crassus has actually planned for the rebels to sort of go out the northern entrance and kind of essentially go into this kind of like snowbound mountain top. And here's the bone of contention I have with this episode. So what Crassus has done, he's somehow managed to dig a huge trench around the sort of the top of this mountain, so they can't escape. And it's a massive feat in engineering, even for this day and age, and it's kind of a little bit pushing the boundaries, I think, you know, in regards to that. Now, I'm not sure in historical context what actually happened in regards to Spartacus' capture and the actual solid facts regarding what's happened, but I'll be surprised if it's anything like that, to be quite honest with you. And I just thought maybe that was a little bit stupid. I mean, they had, you know, sort of Crassus' men don't seem to have been there for around Spartacus' city for all that amount of time. And you had to sort of like to dig this like seemingly like 100-foot deep sort of trench completely around this kind of like hilltop side. It just seems a little bit too stupid to me, and that I really didn't like. I'll have to be honest with you. Yeah, okay, maybe it's a good idea for storytelling, but yeah, and I've always said Spartacus is obviously a very sort of like only really a toe dipped in sort of in historical factuality and stuff like that. But even so, it just seems a bit of a sort of a feat beyond the engineering of you know, people of that time in that shorter space of time. So I didn't like the ending of it, I have to say. So I'm going to give this episode a 7 out of 10. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you next time. See you later.